So here's the thing. There's a lot going on with Sonic right now. The third movie, Shadow Generations, even the comics are pretty strong. With all this stuff going on, it made me want to talk about the franchise again. As I was thinking of ideas, I came across an iceberg chart, created by King Boater. Hope that's how you pronounce it. I realized I haven't done an iceberg in a while, so fuck it, that's what I'm doing now. This iceberg covers topics from the games, to the movies, to the shows, and comics. And it's pretty dense. Because of that, we'll only be covering the first 2 layers in this video. Don't worry, it'll still be plenty long. I love talking about this franchise. And if you want to see the rest of the iceberg covered, make sure you know what you gotta do, subscribe. And hey, just to sweeten that pot a little more, at the end of this iceberg, I'll be sharing something that I discovered that's so unknown, I literally have not heard anyone but me talk about it. And I'm serious, this isn't bait, this shit's been haunting me for years, okay? Trust me, this will be worth it. But before we get to that, we need to cover the rest of this iceberg, starting with Sonic Extreme. Probably the most infamous cancelled Sonic game. This was originally meant to be Sonic's first big 3D game, set to release for the Sega Saturn. It was apparently an absolute disaster behind the scenes. It went through like 4 different versions. At one point, characters from the Archie comics were supposed to be in there. They wanted to introduce a character named Tina Bubowski. It was a fucking mess. The reason why this is so infamous is because, unlike most cancelled games, there is a trailer for this game, made while it was still very much unfinished. And by God, does it look like utter shit. The levels look terrible, it's all zoomed in, there are multiple parts where the guy playing just fucks up the jump and they just keep it in the trailer. There's honestly a lot to get into with this game. I'd recommend watching the What Happened on Sonic Extreme, it goes into everything and is lovely. Ultimately, while it is fascinating, I'm glad we live in a world where we got Sonic Adventure over Sonic Extreme. The only thing that Sonic Extreme had that Adventure didn't is Fang the goddamn sniper was meant to be in Sonic Extreme, and now he's stuck in a classic era. Dr. Kintober. This is a kind of unofficial backstory given to Eggman. Back when Sonic was still being created, the franchise, not the character, Sega created a big Sonic Bible full of possible backstories and lore and shit. And in one version we got the story for Dr. Kintober, which would eventually be adapted into the Fleetway Sonic comic over in England. Basically, Eggman was originally a good guy named Dr. Kintober, who was researching the Chaos Emeralds. Sonic was there too, I guess. Then one day Kintober was like, man, I want to eat lunch! But oh no, the only thing in there is a rotten egg. Then conveniently some science mishap happens, and Dr. Kintober merges with the eggs, turning him into the rotten Dr. Ivo Robotnik. It's literally Kintober backwards. Weird, didn't it? I just fucking put this together. Weird that they literally had him become an Eggman and then didn't go with Eggman. That's kind of weird, right? Anyways, this was never actually canon, but the name Robotnik obviously stayed around, along with a few other things in this old book. Honestly, giving the Bible a little look-through can be fun just for the sake of seeing what almost was. Also, I'd just like to point out that, going back up here for a second, when it was talking about Sonic, it referenced shapely hedgehogettes. These guys were always furries, weren't they? Director's Cut differences. This is a reference to Sonic Adventure DX, Director's Cut, the version of Sonic Adventure ported to the GameCube as well as pretty much everywhere else nowadays. It's massively seen as a downgrade from the Dreamcast version due to the Dreamcast being more powerful than the GameCube. This resulted in a graphical downgrade as well as a number of glitches and just oddities. It's unknown why the objectively inferior version of this game is the one that's being sold on modern digital stores, but a great amount of work has been done in the modding scene to correct this, with the incredible Dreamcast Conversion mod being a wonderful recreation of the original version of this game. Nick Arcade footage. Back in the 90s, there was a show called Nick Arcade, where kids could play video games for prizes and shit. In one episode, they even managed to get their hands on an early copy of Sonic 2 for a sort of cross-promotion. The clip of the game we get is brief, but does show some clear differences. Sonic's sprite is different, Tails isn't there, there's these weird snail robots that aren't in the game, and Emerald Hill Zone is playing the music from Starlight Zone from Sonic 1. Also, the game is played by Melissa Joan Hart.
Very fast. All right. Turn around, Melissa.
I'm pretty sure no one my age knows who that is, but you know, kind of neat for the 30-year-olds. Unused goggles. Hidden in the files of Sonic 1 are a weird series of sprites for Sonic wearing goggles, as well as an item box with the goggles on it. For a while it was speculated that this was some sort of cut power-up. After all, Sonic famously can't swim, so maybe this would be some way to make him breathe underwater or something. As it turns out, no. The box was merely meant to demonstrate that water was coming up. The goggles themselves were likely just a fun little cosmetic change for when Sonic was underwater. Sonic 3 Leftovers. Sonic 3 and Knuckles was originally meant to be one game, but in order to make a marketing deal with McDonald's, the game was split in two. First Sonic 3, and then Sonic and Knuckles. If you wanted the complete experience, you need to get both and physically smash the cartridges together with some lock-on technology. However, there is evidence in Sonic 3 of its original scale. If you managed to put in the level select code, you'd see levels from Sonic and Knuckles in the list. But it's kinda hard to find nowadays since Sonic Team likes to just ignore the fact that Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles were ever separate games to begin with. Not that it really matters though, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is obviously the best way to play that game. The barrel. The ever-infamous barrel from Carnival Night Zone in Sonic 3. At one point in the level, you stumble upon this part where you need to push up and down in order to get it to move. This mechanic is obviously never explained in-game and really isn't all that intuitive, leading this point to be a stopper for a lot of people's playthroughs of the game. Because of how weird it is that this barrel even exists from a game design standpoint, it's become kind of a meme. Somari's Unknown Origins. Somari is an infamous bootleg of Sonic 1 on the NES, where you play as Mario but with Sonic's abilities. It's so bizarre, it's become a bit of a meme in the bootleg fandom, which yes does exist and yes I am a part of. And contrary to the Iceberg's title, we actually do know where this game came from. I don't know, this Iceberg is a few years old, we might not have found out until after it was made. Somari was designed by a Taiwanese game studio called Hummer Team, who seem to specialize in these weird bootleg games. Hummer Team is also responsible for such classics as Street Fighter 4, Kart Fighter, and Earthworm Jim 3. Ironically, it wasn't legal troubles that got this place shut down. Their games just stopped selling well, so they just closed up shop. I know it might sound weird from our perspective, but in East Asian countries like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and West Taiwan, there's actually a surprisingly big market for bootleg games. The Sonic Cycle. The Sonic Cycle is an idea coined by one of the only three notable Australians, Yahtzee Croshaw. Pretty much it goes like this. A new Sonic game is announced, the Sonic fans get super hyped, the game comes out and doesn't live up to the hype, and everyone forgets about it until the next one is announced. Whether you believe in the Sonic Cycle is sort of a matter of how you view the Sonic franchise. I can definitely say that there are certainly examples of it. I can also think of plenty of examples that go against it. Sonic Frontiers was fucking despised when it was first announced, and meanwhile people still rave about how good games like Generations, Rush, and even the adventure games are. Again though, I think there is at least some validity to this. Sonic Superstars definitely went through something like this, but it's not like this is something exclusive to Sonic here. Games getting overhyped happens all the fucking time. And I still like Sonic Superstars better than Mania, so fuck it. Honey the Cat. Honey the Cat is a character that's in a really weird space right now. She's basically in a limbo space between canon and non-canon, just like Styx the Badger. She was a character originally meant to be included in Sonic the Fighters. The game ran on the same engine as Sega's Virtua Fighters, and Honey was meant to be a cheeky reference to a character of, well, Honey. I mean, look at the two, one's just the other's fursona. She was there pretty far into development before mysteriously being cut from the game and replaced with Amy Rose. Honey was later discovered when people did some digging into the game's code, and eventually was added into a re-release of the game for modern consoles as a secret character. Since then, she's made scant appearances in official images or comic books. She was an Archie at some point, but fucking everyone was. And while other characters like Mighty, Ray, Bean, Bark, and obviously Fang the Sniper have crawled their way back into relevancy, Honey is still on that little island of obscurity. Mephiles is Satan. I mean, the guy's name is Mephiles. It's an obvious reference to Mephistopheles. He also kind of has a fallen angel thing going on, since he was once part of the candle fire that was so loud. Look, who gives a fucking shit? This is Sonic 06 lore. Beta Windy Valley. Windy Valley is one of the first levels in Sonic Adventure. However, data miners were able to uncover a beta version of the level from a Sonic Adventure prototype. It's since been restored and is now playable through mods. It's definitely got a different look and feel to it than the rest of the game, so if you want to try a taste of what Sonic Adventure could have been, feel free to give it a try. The Secretary menu. In Sonic Adventure 2, there's a minor mechanic where you could select different characters to theme your in-game menu around. They'll appear in the background and have dialogue every time you select something. An even more minor mechanic is that you could unlock and purchase other character themes, like Maria or Amy. And an even more minor mechanic, practically an Easter egg honestly, is that by doing a very specific action you can unlock a secret theme for the President's Secretary, a character who appears in one scene. Here's what you do, you go into the options menu, spin the stick around, then she appears. It's so fucking weird that someone thought to add this at all, but there's also a bit of charm to that. Big the Cat, Sonic Adventure 2 locations. Big the Cat is a character introduced in Sonic Adventure 1 as one of the main characters. Sonic Team quickly realized their mistake and decided to not have him return in Sonic Adventure 2 as a playable character. However, they decided to add him in as a random Easter egg, sometimes in levels and sometimes if you press B at the right time during certain cutscenes. This ended up becoming kind of a franchise-running gag, where Big is just in inexplicable locations for mysterious reasons. Even the comics keep this gag up. Sometimes in crowd shots, you'll just see Big off fishing somewhere. I kinda like it, honestly. This is a good thing for his character to do. The Sky Chase Dragon. Much like the beta version of Windy Hill, the Sky Chase Dragon was found in an early version of Sonic Adventure 1. However, there's a lot of mystery surrounding it. Sure, we know it was meant to be in the Sky Chase level, hence the name, and from what we can interpret, it was probably some sort of boss that you'd fight, but how you'd fight it and where it even come from are all a mystery. Sonic Crackers. Sonic Crackers is the prototype put together for Knuckles Chaotix. Knuckles Chaotix is a fucking terrible game, where the premise is Knuckles and a bunch of other guys are chained together with some weird rubber band mechanic. Despite them only making a cameo appearance at the end of the game, the prototype features Sonic and Tails running through a few levels, and a weird overhead map system. Despite being cut from the game, Sonic and Tails still exist in the game in spirit. Sonic's code was eventually transferred over to the character of Mighty the Armadillo, who looks nearly identical to Sonic if you put their sprites next to each other, and Tails' code was just kinda left there. If you mess around with the game a little bit, you can even still choose him as a character, but he'll just appear as a white Knuckles sprite that the fandom has named Weknia. R2. R2 is the name of a cut level from Sonic CD. Not too much is known about this level, but there are hints of it in the game's code. There's a few badniks and even a boss specifically labeled for R2, but there's no leftover assets for the level itself. There is some evidence for this level in the game, and that is the end cutscene. At the end of Sonic CD, an animated cutscene plays that's sort of a highlight reel of every level in the game, and R2 is featured. Sonic hops between a few collapsing pits and almost gets eaten by an antlion. We also have some concept art of the level showing that it would have likely taken place underground with weird rainbow waterfalls. We've gotten conflicting reports as to why it was cut, and ultimately, while we do have some hints, what this level was originally meant to be is still a complete mystery and probably always will be. Removed Cowgirl. In the Japanese version of the Sonic Adventure level Casinopolis, there's a neon sign of a skimpily dressed cowgirl holding a wine glass. Going up to the sign and attacking it as Knuckles would even cause it to moan. This was cut out of the English version for Sonic Adventure because, well, kinda weird for a kids game, innit? However, even stranger, in prototype versions of the game, it seems like it was originally intended to be a full-on Playboy-style bunny girl. Magic Gloves. The Magic Gloves are a very obscure item in Sonic Adventure 2. They're hidden in City Escape, the first level of the Hero campaign, and they allow Sonic to capture enemies in bubbles. It's such a strange item that most people just ignore, especially because you need to go out of your way to find it during a replay of the level, because you need to have abilities that you don't unlock until later on in the game. Robotnik is the hero. At first I thought this was kind of a joke entry before I remembered that Eggman was originally designed to be the hero of Sonic 1. See, Sonic's origin is that he was created during a design contest at Sega for a new mascot. But one of the designs was a big fat guy with a huge mustache and a big toothy grin. Once Sonic was chosen, the design was later refined and turned into Dr. Eggman. Splats! 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 Splats is a cut badnik from Sonic 1. Normally this wouldn't mean too much, but for some reason, Splats was fucking everywhere in promotional material for the franchise. See, back in the early days of Sonic, when characters were more sparse, badniks and animal friends were sort of treated as characters as well. There were toys of Splats, trading cards of Splats. Splats even appeared in both the Archie and Fleetway comics. Eventually, he was given his time to shine in Sonic Mania when he appeared as a badnik in Press Garden, finally giving this strange little rabbit the role he's been chasing for 25 years. Archie Lawsuit. Okay, so I really don't want to go too in-depth with this topic because I'm obviously going to go into much greater detail when I get to it in the Archie Sonic project I announced a few weeks ago. Or a few months ago, oh god. Point is, I'll give you the bullet points, and if you want to hear more details, subscribe so you can be ready when the full video comes out. Once upon a time, there was a man named Ken Penders. Our old Ken was a wacky guy who did a lot of wacky things while he was working on Archie Sonic. Some of those wacky things include weird Nazi echidnas who were trapped in an alternate dimension for like 500 years or some shit. Then, in 2008, Sega had BioWare make Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood, an absolutely terrible game that thankfully isn't canon, so we can toss it in the void alongside Sonic Freeriders and Sonic 4. However, Ken noticed that this game's characters had a few similarities to his characters, so he made a big ol' fuss. And to make a long story short, Archie ended up losing some paperwork that said everything Ken made belonged to Sega. Now, while the game wasn't deemed copyright infringement, there was still a big issue because Ken was the head writer of Archie for 10 fucking years. So much of his lore and characters were just directly intertwined with what Archie Sonic was. So, Archie pretty much had to do a massive DC-style Crisis event and reboot the entire universe, which ultimately, eventually, led to Archie Sonic getting cancelled. Mr. Needlemouse, the original and proposed name for Sonic, changed for obvious reasons. Well, what the fuck you want me to go? Keep going? There's nothing else about this, that's all it is. Pingus! A famous ancient meme from the old TV show Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Dr. Robotnik says,
"Snooping as usual, I see."
All someone had to do was cut out the snoo, and it kinda sounds like Dr. Robotnik is saying penis.
Pingas!
And that, my friends, was the peak of comedy in the internet back in the day. Nah, who am I kidding? It still is. It even eventually got referenced by Sonic Boom.
Ah, Sonic the Hedgehog! Snooping as usual, I see.
Flicky, 1984.
This is like George Orwell's book, 1984.
Flicky is an old arcade game that Sega made back in 1984. In it, you play as a little bluebird who has to guide little ducklings out of rooms full of cats. This is notable because Flicky ended up being a character in Sonic. Kinda. Flickies are the name for the little birds that can be found throughout the Sonic franchise. See, in Sonic, actual animal names are reserved for the Mobian versions of their species. You know, hedgehog, echidna, fox. These terms are used only for the anthropomorphized versions of these animals. The animals which act more like actual animals are called small animals, or critters, and usually have unique names for their species. These include Flickies, Peckies, Cuckies, Pickies, Pockies, Rickies, Rockies, Mickeys, Beckies, Lockies, Talkies, and Walkies. You may have picked up on a little naming convention there. I'm proud because I was able to get through that my first try. This is the explanation for how you can have something like Cream the Rabbit bust open a robot and have a slightly more realistic rabbit pop out. These are different animals in this universe, so they have different names. I actually think that's a cute bit of world building, which is why it kinda sucks they didn't end up continuing it. At a certain point, they just started calling the critters by their real species name. I get the whole original naming convention thing would get tiring, but I like the concept. Oh shit, I got off track. Yeah, Flicky is canon, I guess. 1993 Macy's Day Incident. The year, 1993. The place, Columbus Circle, New York. The time, I don't know. The date, November 25th. A particularly windy Thanksgiving Day. A crowd of millions was in attendance as the 69th Nice Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade began. To the naked eye, everything seemed fine, but trained professionals said otherwise.
So it's a little more difficult than usual.
There had already been a number of incidents, like the iconic cartoon character Rex the Dinosaur getting his fucking nose ripped off. But all that pales in comparison to the destruction wrought by a certain balloon's first and last trip. As the 64-foot tall Sonic the Hedgehog balloon was moving south from Columbus Circle, a large gust of wind blew it eye first into a street lamp. Not only did the collision puncture the balloon, sending it hurtling down towards the street, but it also snapped the street lamp. The broken pieces of the lamp came flying to the ground, eventually colliding with an off-duty police officer and a little girl.
Smashes into the lamppost, broke the lamppost, and the large part of the lamp came down and looked like it smacked this fella in the back.
The crowd began to scream as the balloon's wranglers managed to wrestle the quickly deflating mass of plastic to the center of the street, ending its rampage once and for all. But the little girl was fine and the cop just had a fractured shoulder, so I guess it's not that bad. Michael Jackson worked on Sonic 3. This is something that's still kinda debated to this day. A lot of people aren't sure as to whether or not Michael Jackson composed some music for Sonic 3. This all comes from the fact that MJ had a very close relationship with Sega at the time, and different elements from some Sonic 3 songs are pretty similar to some elements found in some of MJ's later music. The theory goes that the reason why he went uncredited was because shortly after he composed the music, MJ's first big controversy started, and Sega wanted to distance themselves from it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the current consensus is that he himself did not work on the composition, but members of his team did. Oh, that's just where it ends. Oh, whoops. I guess my lazy ass forgot to write an ending to the script. Alright, well, thank you all for watching. I know that this video is a bit shorter than normal, but I wanted this video to come out before Shadow Generations did, because I know that's going to take up pretty much all of my time for the whole weekend, and I don't want to have to delay the video. So yeah, I hope you liked it. Don't forget to do all the stuff you're supposed to do to make me feel good. You know what it all is, I don't even have to tell you. I'm Sir Strongman, and that was the thing.